Hey everyone, welcome to SwitchHub TV. It's your hosts Wai and John. We're honored to have David Wong on the show today. David is the General Manager of FMCG Industry Solutions, providing technical products to the food, pharmaceutical, and mining industry. David also has a ton of experience as a microbiologist in the dairy industry. David, welcome to the show. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Wai, and thanks, John, for inviting me along. It's been good.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to do this. We know you're a very busy man, so we'll get straight to it. Just to provide some context, can you tell us, how did you get interested in science? What made you want to get into the scientific industry?
I think one of the main things is always trying to seek knowledge, just a good understanding of things. And I think science is a good way to actually get into it and learn and understand how things work, how things operate. And I just really gravitate towards things because every time I see things, I just want to understand how it works. And the only way you can do that is really in a career as scientists do that. So I always envisioned wearing a lab coat. I wasn't sure where, but when I was a kid, and I guess like when you visualize yourself in a lab coat, you eventually end up being there later on in life. So that's how I got into it. And so that got me the marks to get into university to study. And I actually ended up doing biomedical science at University of Technology in Sydney, majoring biochemistry, and I thought that was great. But I guess I started from there with my first career in a pathology lab. And then a friend of mine asked me, he went to university with me. He said, "Oh, there's an opening where I'm working. You should come along, join me." And so this is what we call networking. And it was a trainee position. So I actually, he asked me and he said, "I'll talk to my boss." And that's how I actually end up in Arnott's to get the experience working in the food industry. So it's not as easy as you think. It's not like you can just apply for a job and get in there.
Yeah. Sorry, David, can we just go back for a bit? Because I never knew. I've known you for a long time and I knew you're very sort of experienced, but I never knew you started in a pathology lab. So can you just talk about like that a little bit? Like what was your role there? And then why you decided to sort of move on when there was a good opportunity to go into the food industry?
I started that because that position was what I actually studied. So when I go to University of Technology, one of their main focus is actually to get you into the industry. So they work with industry people, and you're encouraged to actually find a job because as you finish towards the end of the course, your degree, a lot of the seminars and lectures they're actually started becoming later on in the day, starting at 6 p.m. So what do you do during the day? You can find a job and still study. And so they encouraged that during the last part, and I just gravitated towards what I was studying. So I ended up in a pathology lab, and that wasn't very long actually. It was probably for 6 months.
Yeah.
And and it's usually once you get into a career and you gain your experience, that's where your career takes off. And I made a jump from being microbiology. I made a jump from a pathology to microbiology, but rather than go from, it's more like a pathology it's more like microbiology within a food industry.
Yeah.
So once you jump into food, it's very hard to jump back. And so my career was starting from there. So,
yes.
And I was there for 7 years.
So what made you like really want to like move from pathology to the food industry? Is it because, that was a trusted friend or?
Yeah. And how did you
Arnott's,
get there?
or is it because of the image of Arnott's, being very iconic to the industry? So what was it that made you decide?
It was actually a trusted friend because we were single. We were hanging out together. He just said, "Come along, we'll party there." So
yeah,
and so I jumped across, and it was a trainee position. So unlike what happens these days, a trainee position sort of like it was a 2-year trainee. So you rotate it around the whole, chemistry, microbiology, but you didn't start off becoming a lab manager or microbiologist straight away. You had to spend 6 months in media preparation, 6 months into plating, 6 months into report writing. So it's not like now where and I think that's missing in these days, is that there was quite rigorous just to get in and go through the program.
Yeah.
And I think now these days to get into any of these companies, you have to go through exams to get in, to qualify and make sure your aptitude test is correct. And then you move on. So at the time I got in because of through contact, through networking, which I didn't realize it was probably a pretty good opportunity at the time.
Yeah. And then so you were there for a very long time, but I guess since then you've sort of you remained in the food industry. So there must be something about the food industry that really appeals to you.
It was the branding. Like there's a lot of big brands out there. It's just really interesting how things operate, and it is a very niche area, and it's not what you know, it's also who you know within the industry. So I was lucky and fortunate enough that I made a lot of good contacts there.
Yeah.
And after 7 years, I left and I started. I did my master's degree, and then halfway through that, someone said, "Oh, look, are you still interested in a job in microbiology?" And I said, "Sure." So he suggested I apply for it in the papers. And basically, he was saying, if you want the job, it's yours.
Yeah.
And that was my contact in Arnott's who asked me through her contact.
Yeah.
So, again, It's called networking. And then, but you have to prove. So don't think that if you're one of these people who are lazy, you're lazy, people don't like you, you're unfriendly, you're not a pleasant person to be along with. Don't expect that you get a job. And it's all about who they would recommend. So if someone's looking for a job, or if you were looking for a job, you will have to would you recommend yourself for that position? That's what it all boils down to. And it's all about your attitude and personality as well. So don't think it's just, I got in. It's also personality and how you get along with people and how you relate to them as well.
So I like that you bring that up, because that's really been mentioned by a few of the other people that we've brought onto the show as well, in terms of the importance of, having the networks, but then actually being able to demonstrate that you can do the job and you know what you're talking about. Because if you don't know what you're doing, or you don't have that, I guess, like you said, that reputation, then no one's going to put their name on the line for you.
Yeah, because you got to also you got to realize when someone recommends somebody. I mean, I'm also in the same situation. I when people ask me, "Oh, can you help me get a role?" I look at that person. I'm thinking, well, I have to recommend that person, and if that person is not great, then I can't recommend them. But usually I work with them, or I know who they are. Of course, I can say, yeah, this person's all right, because they're putting their trust in me.
Yep.
It's all about mirror, definitely.
And in the past, quite, I'm talking about over a decade ago, there are a person who, recruitment companies actually called me up and asked me for a referee. And I think you got to be, just do the right thing by letting that person know that you're going to be putting in a referee. And second, like what position they're applying for, so they can get their facts right. Most of the time I have recommended people, but there are times when I said no to a recruitment company because that person wasn't very good.
Yeah, definitely.
And that person reported to me, and I had to say no. So, but it was almost like less than 5% of that, 95%.
Yeah. So, in terms of recommending people, is it at your point of interest whether it's their performance that you would recommend, or is it their aptitude and personality? Because, say for example, if a person is good,
I look at. Yeah, this is a hard one. When I look, you have to look at both,
right?
Because you got to look at, one is, are they competent to do the role, and that's not hard to do. If you're competent, you pretty much. And if you're a person who starts at maybe 8 and you finish till 6, and they're committed to do the work, that's okay, and that's good. But if people come out at 9 and finish at 5 and walk out the door, I mean, I don't mind that either. But as long as the work is done correctly, and that they do a full day's work, and they'll come in and finish. If they have to push hard, they'll come in and they do the extra hours. It's but the people who come in late, finish early, works half, finish, it's very hard to recommend those people. And usually in the big companies, the brand companies, you find some really good people there. Yeah. And also don't forget the personality is important as well. So, because if I'm recommending somebody, they're going to go, oh, does that person fit within my team?
Yeah.
So if that person has got a reputation being hard to get along with, not a team player, you wouldn't want to put them in someone else's group team, which will cause havoc. You got to have a balance.
Yeah.
and you can sort of work that out just by talking to them and see how they are.
Yeah.
It just you get a feel for it.
And so, just going back to your career for a bit, David. So, you know, you did your 7-year stint at Arnott's, but then you worked for another iconic Aussie brand, Dairy Farmers. You know, so you worked there.
I worked there
as a microbiologist and then like a lab manager. So, can you just talk about your experiences there? What was that like? I mean, I know you met a lot of interesting characters there as well.
Yeah. So in the Dairy Farmers, when I finished my I went from a microbiology labs for a brief stint, and then someone said, there's a role at Dairy Farmers. I applied for it. I got that role. She said I'd be good at it and explained to me. So again, it was networking because she used to work there.
Yeah.
So I got in. I got that role, and it was just senior. But it was basically my role was senior microbiologist, but I actually managed the whole laboratory. It was an ARC certified laboratory. It was they called the corporate lab. It's quite interesting. A lot of travel involved. I was in charge of I think it was 5 people, but on top of that, I had a responsibility looking after the microbiology for 13 factories around Australia.
Far out. Okay.
So I became so that was quite interesting because I was the expert. So every time there was an issue and they couldn't resolve it, I came in there as a troubleshooter and looking at, and so they gave me experience in not just in the laboratory, but also applying basic microbiology into the
manufacturing. Yeah.
Like cross-contamination, pathogen testing, tracking, all that.
So you were based at one site, but then you were managing the quality control, I guess, or the labs for 13 sites essentially.
I managed a NASA. It was the central laboratory. So each factory had their own quality control laboratory.
Yeah.
And each of those, you had a quality manager.
Yeah.
And they looked after the quality systems, the testing.
Yes.
So what I did was I standardized the testing for each of the sites.
Right.
So they're comparing apples with apples, because when a company, it doesn't end up with 13 factories straight away. There's a lot of mergers and acquisition.
Yeah.
And during that process, you will have a factory with a different culture and a different testing regime.
Yeah.
So you had to standardize. So if somebody's measuring total plate count using a Petri film and someone measuring with total plate count using agar, it's going to be slightly different. So you really have to make sure everything's comparing apples with apples in terms of serial dilution, how they're going to report is it going to be a TNTC, or is it going to be, which is total tuna moisture count, or is it going to be greater than 250 or greater than 150? You've got to make sure that everything's reporting correctly.
Yeah.
And then you got to link that with your product specifics. There's could be coliform not detected in 0.1 grams, and then there could be less than 1 or less than 3 using MPN, and then there could be less than 1 using a Petri film. So everyone had different standards and different methods. So as a chief microbiologist, you have to standardize that. You have to talk to people who don't report to you and get them to build up rapport. So that was a challenging task.
So that leads on to my next question, David. What was the biggest challenge of that? Because there's these 13 labs. There could have been 13 different operating methods in terms of their test methods and reporting and all that. So what was the biggest challenge in terms of trying to standardize that across the sites?
Just personality clashes. I guess the main thing is just getting them to come on board on the same goal. So and this is where it's quite important that you need to do some sort of selling. So people say, like, I'll explain later on in my career, I'm actually doing a lot of sales, but in the early part, I didn't realize that when you're actually pushing things through, you need to do some sort of selling. And selling is actually not selling. Selling is actually just getting them to an idea and getting them to accept the benefits of that certain idea that you're trying to implement, and get them to implement that without you enforcing it, because you can't actually enforce it, because these are different sites. And then it's almost like doing, for example, we were based in New South Wales, but we had a few sites in Queensland who had their own systems and they had their own team. And they don't like someone from New South Wales come up to Queensland and telling them what to do. Yeah, of course. So we had to work together. So it's all about building rapport, bridging, just getting friendly with everybody, making sure your personality is okay, but all at the same time being assertive. So if there's a certain point and certain things you need to do, you just got to put your foot down.
Yeah.
and you put it down hard. So, but without you put your foot down hard, but without pissing them off is probably a better word for it.
Yeah.
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 So that was probably some of the challenges that I dealt with. But once it's going, got things going, it's actually quite easy. But it all goes back to like your goals, your planning, your vision of actually where you want to go. So you need to explain all that, and that's where I think also communication is quite important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to, so you did mention it, I do want to give you some time to talk about FMCG, but before we get to that, and we won't go into any personal or confidential territory, but I know in terms of around the end of Dairy Farmers, there was some circumstances, sort of as to why that was no longer an option anymore, that didn't pan out. Are you able to talk about that and what happened there and how that experience was like?
So I ran the micro lab central, and then there was a cost cutting exercise across the business. I guess when new management came in and they made the decision to shut down the laboratory and outsource it to a third party lab because they thought it was cheaper. But you look on the other side, the third party lab wanted to get the contract, so they lowered their costs, so we couldn't match their costing. And we told them that, but unfortunately management took that on board, and then they shut down the lab. And they moved me to head office, and they said, you manage the whole laboratory testing services from a head office environment, which at the time I thought, how do you manage that? I don't have anybody reporting to me. They got rid of all my staff, but it was actually a bit of a challenge, but it just taught you another skill, is that now you're dealing with companies that it's not part of the same group, and get them to set up systems and procedures and everything. So that was quite interesting, but I guess out of that, it gave me the experience of what it's like in a head office environment.
Yeah.
So in terms of politics, I understood all that. But in the end, the basic thing still stands, that if you push yourself and you work hard and you do a good, honest day's work, you just do your work correctly, you can go quite far within the group.
Yeah.
So I was in there for 3 years in a head office environment, managing all these labs, traveling around. I had a pretty big budget to travel wherever I wanted to, but towards the end of my career there, it was taken over by another company, which is the Lion Dairy and Drinks Group, and basically they said, if you want a role, it's actually in Melbourne, and I said, no, thank you, I'll take the money and go.
Yeah.
And so my career finished there. So.
Yeah. So how was that like for you as a manager? So you had a team of microbiologists report to you, and then you basically had to tell them, you guys, we don't have a lab anymore, so the lab's going to fold. How was that? How did you handle that? And what was that like?
I was about to ask that same thing.
Well. So because you're in head office environment, you've got some extremely senior people there. So you sort of have that association with them that gives you that sense that, look, I'm actually with these guys who are quite senior managers. And even that influence of the senior manager's name helps them to get things across, because you can escalate it. And when you're in head office, you're only like another two layers away from the CEO. Yeah. So that sort of helped push things across in that sense. So that was quite good, I think. But it was good because in a head office environment, you've got freedom, you've got your objectives you need to meet. But I guess the most beneficial things there, I met up with a lot of key contacts.
Yeah.
Like senior managers, and they don't usually stay there. They move around to other food companies. And so I've got contacts within the whole food industry through my association, just being in head office. So it's been good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And
but yeah, that finished. That my career finished there. But through that and through my contact, I did a small stint at Fonterra down in head office down in Melbourne, which is, my manager was based down there, and he actually asked me to do some work for him, consulting work. So I did that, and then I thought, at the same time, I also got a role in sales, selling test kits to the dairy industry, antibiotic resistant test kits. And they needed someone experienced in dairy. So that was, I got into that as well. And I started doing sales. And then after 6 months, I thought, not sure whether I wanted to do this. Luckily, the person I met some key people who were working in a supply company, some of the owners, and I said, "Oh, can you help me out?" And they helped me set up my own business, which is called FMCG Industry Solutions. So we started doing a lot more supply of products as services. So initially it started off with services and contracting, but as the business grew, we started doing, I started doing more products. And then as I started doing more products, again, contacts within the dairy industry or my association in the network saying, can you do this? Can you do that? And all of a sudden I've grabbed a few products to distribute. So now I distribute the Delray tests, as you probably know, Wai, from DSM, because that's where you work. And that's one, but I've picked up a few other ones. So I started transitioning away from services to more product testing. So more product, not product testing, but more products. And because of my contacts within the dairy industry and within the food industry, I started supplying them. Also, the friends who helped me to get into sales and set my own business, they gave me the guidance on how to guide me into the right direction, how to get free, advertising, how to get just to do the basic sales, like meet up with, just make appointments, see customers, talk to them what you got in your product list, and just do that. So I did that, for a few years before it got a lot bigger. And through that, I was lucky enough to have friends who also were moving out and doing their own things. So guys at Icon Foods, I set up a laboratory for them in exchange for allowing me to have their premises to use and store my products.
Yep.
So that worked out pretty well. And that I introduced them to, and I was part of the DIAA, the Dairy Industry Association, and through my network. And I met some people there who are investors, and I introduced the guy from the Icon Foods to the investor, and they set up the Premium River Dairy. So so it was through contacts and association networking. So that's quite big, and people are happy to help you out if you actually let them know what you're doing.
Yeah. And a very long time, David, you were in the technical, right? So you were like a microbiologist for so long, and then you moved into a sales role. So what was that like? Being like that technical lab life, and then going into HQ and then sales.
Well, I had a lot of contacts within people in sales reps, and said, they said I'd be good in sales. So there was one guy, David Wong. I'm not sure if you know him. He taught me some of the sales tactics or sales, how to do sales. And really, it's not that hard. I think it's your personality. You really got to. One of the things you need to learn is, and it's probably not easy for some people, is you need to communicate. Come out. You need to build rapport really quickly. You need to be friendly and all that, and you got to be honest. I think deep down, if you're a salesperson, you just got to be truthful and honest in what you do. So there's that integrity. Some people come here to make a quick buck, and then they'll leave. I've brought on my philosophy that I've really got to help someone. I don't take shortcuts. If the product's not good, I won't sell it. And if I think that I can sell someone just to get a quick dollar, I won't do it. I cherish that friendship, because that's long term. And that's how I see the industry working, is that you really got to look at the long-term aspects, and it may not happen straight away, but you'll see the return 6 months down the track. And I've been doing this now for, I think, over 10 years since I started. So the first few years was really difficult because I wasn't sure where I was going. But I always had in my mind that I would never go anything less than what I was getting at Dairy Farmers. And I seemed to achieve that, doing consulting and everything. But but as I started growing, I started doing a lot better. So obviously, so it's you've just got to have that persistent. I can't explain it. It's like some people. I met a lot of people along the journey, and I'm surprised that maybe because I'm hanging around with different people. Because David Wong started up his business called Key Diagnostics, and he was 2 years ahead of me. And we were both starting out around the same time. So he's grown 3-4 times, and then I've probably 3-4 times my size. I'm still growing. He's still way ahead of me. Probably now, I think he's probably 3 times the size of who I am. But it's funny how things turn up, because we were going to set up a lab together, and somehow he ended up in Caringbah. He got his office, and I was setting up the lab for him in his office down in Caringbah. And then now we're actually located at 35 meters across the other side of the warehouse, and that's where we're based, because he ran out of space, and he wanted to expand, and we had our products there. He couldn't expand, so we moved across. So yeah, so that's how it started. And then once you've got your own place, you can move forward from there.
Right. So David, if I may ask, so essentially, when you opened your own business at FMCG, what was your goal back then? Like, what was your ideal back then for FMCG?
Well, I worked in the dairy industry, so I thought, fast-moving consumer goods, or anything to provide solutions to that industry. So it's not just, there's pharma. And my idea was, when you're in business, you're also there to make money. You can't say, I'm just there to enjoy myself. So you have to make money to keep yourself going, but at the same time, you provide good products and services. And I guess the other thing is, everyone's always looking for that financial freedom, financial independence. So working for someone is great, because you get a salary, and as you go higher and higher, you get an incremental increase, plus you may get a car and all the other stuff, and that's fine. But it comes to a point as to how far you climb that corporate ladder, and it gets quite narrow as you climb up the top, and everybody, and there's a certain timeline that you have to climb quickly. But then the thing is, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. Right. So sometimes I think, well, rather than climb the corporate ladder, maybe it's good to have your own ladder, and that's how I started. And I think, well, you've got more. I've got more control compared to someone if I was working in the industry, because it's no more loyalty, because working for a company for 10 years or 20 years, it's pretty hard now. Companies aren't loyal anymore. So unlike Japan, where you can stay there for your whole life in one company, it doesn't work. Same with Australia. It just doesn't. I don't know anybody who stays in there from start to finish. It's pretty rare these days. They're all gone. So, so I look at now, if I was still in the industry, I'll probably still be looking. I'll probably be in the role, but in a few years' time, I'll probably be looking to change, because there'll be someone below me who wants to climb up. Right. And I'm sort of like, I want to settle down a bit. Don't push too hard, So, what's better than owning the ladder? So you don't work 5 days a week. I mean, I work whenever I feel like it now. I don't go to the office every day, maybe twice a week, I think. I've got someone looking after the warehouse, so I don't need to do that. I just, just go out there and just do my things, talk to people. If they want a product, yeah, sure, I can help them out and make sure they get the best product for the best price.
Wow, that's a really good thought.
Yeah. So,
and I know we're about to end up here, but I know John has one more question that he wants to ask you.
Well, essentially, I have two. So one thing I'd like to ask is, for our audiences who are listening or watching this video clip, tell us how, do you have any tips for graduates who wanted to enter the industry or trying to figure out what they want to do?
Get your first job, and it doesn't matter how low it is. You need the experience, even if you have to go for like half the rate just to get in. Get the experience, because that's more important than anything else. It's not about, I know there's a group of people that I know who just said, look, I won't accept anything for under certain, rates or whatever. And so there I was asking for the cream without actually proving yourself. I think if you get in there and you prove yourself, the money will come, the promotions will come. People aren't stupid, they know. So just do your best. People will see that. So I've got some people I know who just wouldn't accept anything else, and they're waiting for that high roll all the time, and they're missing all these little ones, and they could have got the little ones and gone up from there. Right. Just to get in. You need to get your foot in, and you got to be persistent. I think some of the things I explained to you in the early days when I started my business is I did a lot of cold calling. So you pick up the phone and you call someone without knowing you, or you turn up to some factory, which is pretty hard. But anyway, I got in and just explain what you're trying to do. And you'd be surprised. Sometimes it does get you through. But a lot of people won't do it. That's what I noticed. A lot of people say, oh, it's too hard. I'm too scared. I haven't got the confidence. Well, just get in there and do it, because it's actually not hard. I'll be honest with you, it's a numbers game. So out of 10 people to 10 visits you make, maybe one will buy in the initial part of it, but you build up, you increase that rate later on. But if you're going to give up on your first step, then you're going to give up on everything, because first step is nothing.
Right.
You know, to get to where I am, I went through almost like 100 steps, but then I didn't think it was like that, because I just kept on going. And you also have a group of friends who support you. So Trevor Warren from Key Diagnostics didn't start, you know, his business like that. He pushed out as well. So
yeah,
that's like really good advice. And one more thing. So essentially, with the knowledge that you have now, what would you like to say to your 20-year-old self who are just starting out as a fresh graduate?
I'll just say, have fun. Just get out there, just have fun, and just keep on, you know, and no like, just go out there and just try. And no may not mean a no. It may mean no now, but it may mean a yes later on. So just keep on going, because I've seen so many things that say, look, I'm not interested. But 6 months later, someone says, Dave, oh, by the way, you came over about 6 months ago. I'm ready to buy now. I said, really? He goes, yeah. I said, great. Okay. And so people, you know, when people say no, they just mean no at this moment in time. Doesn't mean that if I say no
means not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. And you've just got to be up there. You've got to network. So that's, people don't see now. So I mentioned how I got into these roles. It wasn't through me applying. I think it was just getting to know certain people. And through my whole journey, it's been like that. So people I meet are the people who are going to get you where you want to go. So you go out to networking events. I'm the secretary of the DIAA at the moment. And that increases my network, but I've got friends in there. And that's the reason I'm still there, because there's 3 or 4 people who I consider my friends. So even if I don't expect anything from them, but I hang out with them both socially as well. So, you know, and they're within that network, but because they're my friends, you know, they'll do, I shouldn't say they do things, but they look after you as well, look out for you, if you probably a better word for saying that. And I'm talking about looking out for you in the sense that they say, oh, I know you know, I think someone can help you with this area. That's all they do. They just recommend, you know, and that goes a big way.
Yeah, that's great, Dave.
That's great.
It's we're just about out of time, but it's, you know, we covered, we could keep going on and on, because, you know, you have so much experience in the industry, but we captured a lot of things in this chat, and, you know, really grateful that you took the time to speak with us. So really appreciate it.
That's all right. Yeah.
I really do. Thank you very much for accepting our interview.
That's right. So, I mean, for your audience, I hope that you guys continue to push hard and push yourself forward and just keep on knocking on doors, because it will open up. You know, so it's not easy for everybody, but I think sometimes you've got to work. The confidence comes from within, you know, deep down within yourself. So I think sometimes it's inner confidence that you need to build up. And I find that if I was, you know, you mentioned about my 20-year-old, if I was 20-year-old, I would say get more confidence by just going out there, and you get knocked off your feet a few times, but that builds you up and makes you stronger.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for your time, David.
Thank you
really
for your
appreciate
time,
it. Good way to end.
Very good.
Have a good one.
Well, appreciate for inviting me along. So thank you for that.
No,
and good luck in your endeavors. I think it's going to do well. So just keep on pushing it. Right?
Yeah, we will.
Definitely will.
Okay.
All right. Have a great night,
David.
everyone. Thanks, David.
Have a good one. Bye.
Okay.